what I'm going to show you right now is day 3. So like after you have your photo glued down and you've maybe done your carbon transfer, okay, you need to look at finding the darkest values first. You need to start with toning the paper and then adding highlights, or HL, and lowlights, okay? I'm going to show you guys how to do that. A lot of you have animals with fur or people that would have hair that is going to have texture, okay? So I've done the carbon transfer, and I have already gone in here and started to add some texture, okay? When you are adding texture, you might need the following tools. A blender, this is in the drawer that says blender, and also a rubber moldable eraser, okay? Both of these things will help me when I am toning my paper, okay? So as I look at my paper, I first need to find where the darkest places are, okay? I'm going to go ahead and turn this one all the way off so you can see better. So the darkest places are going to be up in the eye, the nose, and then the background, okay? Always start with your darkest areas first. You know that nothing else is going to be darker than that, okay? So if you start there, you know everything else will be moving to a lighter value, okay? After you have found your darkest values, so I'm just going to shade in those patches that I see as totally black in my picture. You need to tone the paper, okay? So toning. Toning means you put a light gray value over the whole space, all right? So let's do that right about on the nose here. I'm going to start. And when I'm toning the paper, I hold my pencil lightly, and I'm just trying to get a general gray. Okay, so here's his nose area, and I'm just going to tone that, and I'm going to tone over here. When you're toning, do not worry about the fact that some places need to be kept white, because you can pull those white highlights out with your blendable eraser, okay? So after I've toned here, next thing I'm going to do is take my blending tool. And the blending tool is really helpful. You can use it to blend out from a dark to light value. You can use it to help you tone the paper, because that way I'm getting a smooth gray across the whole surface. Hopefully you can see it's going to smear the streaks out of the pencil. And I'm going to try and get more of a solid gray value. All right. Now that I have blended and toned this area, okay, next thing I'm going to do is find highlights and lowlights. So looking at my picture here, I'm going to try and pull out any places in my toning area where it might be light. So if I look here, I can mold this eraser to get a more narrow point, and I can go in there and pull out the lead from those areas. So there's a little bit of a highlight right here on the top of his nose. Okay, and there's a little bit of a highlight here on the side of his cheek. It's also really nice because you don't get like the little eraser bits in there. It doesn't make those little things. It just kind of soaks up the lead. Okay, there's a little bit of a highlight right here. So by starting by toning, I can now almost go in and carve away my highlights and lowlights, and that's really what I'm essentially doing. Okay, now that I've found some basic highlight areas, I'm going to go in there and find the lowlights. So the lowlights or shadows are going to be usually right next to a highlight. Okay, so if you can see here, this is where this edge around his eye is, and there's a very big shadow right at the edge of that lighter fur. Okay, so it's like right here. Okay, around the nose. And as you're making your lowlights, think about the fact that this is fur or hair or scales or whatever it is, and make a mark that's appropriate to that texture. So because this is fur, I am making little dash marks to shade in the value. So I'm not only thinking about how hard I press, but also the type of mark I make with my pencil. Okay? Here's that other highlight, and look, there's a nice little shadow right above it. So I'm going to go in there and try and recreate that. So by toning the paper, I already have a nice gray to work with, and I can just simply add that darker gray value over top. You need to have at least 4 values showing as you are creating these. So go ahead and check. I already have a dark value, already have some medium grays. I have definitely some light grays. But you will have to take some time to make sure that you get all those values in there. And down here is where his little jaw line is. So I'm going to put some pigment down. I'm going to take my blending tool and sort of smudge that. Okay? You can even take the blending tool and use that to sort of sculpt that nice light gray value, because it has enough lead on it that you can smear the lead just from what's on there. Okay. So I'm building up a little bit of a nice light gray just by using the blender. Okay. Then I'm going to go through and just try and find the next sharpest areas and really create contrast, really create those edges. Look how nice and dark I can make that. Okay, because if I look here, that's totally black. So by going around the edge of my subject, I can really increase that contrast and make it feel like the subject is popping forward and the background is flat or receding. Okay, this is his jawline here, so I need to have a little more value here. And then we also go back into the very, very dark background. Okay, a little more blending here. So I'm just going back and forth between laying down pigment, pulling pigment up, and it's just a lot of back and forth. And you're checking for where the highlights are, where your shadows are. Okay? You can go ahead and turn that off.